Here's a beginner's guide to watercolors. First, you want to have the right materials. With watercolors, you can choose between tubes or pans. Pans are conveniently dried watercolor paints you can take with you on the go, like this. I use them when I travel. You just add water to reactivate the color. At home, I like to use tubes. It's a better deal and you get way more paint than the pans. And if you ever want to do a really saturated bit, you can go straight from the tube, like this. Now, your paints won't look good unless you have watercolor paper. It really helps to absorb the pigment. Straight out of the tube, watercolor can be opaque, like any other paint medium, but that's not how they're really meant to be used. For watercolors, the more water you add to them, the thinner or more transparent they become. Sometimes you want a light wash of color, so you'll add more water. Sometimes you'll want a real pop of color, so you'll add very little water. Because watercolor is so transparent by nature though, you want to paint your lightest colors first. Your yellows, pinks, light blues, etc. Then add your midtones, your reds and greens, and light browns. And finally, your darker tones, your purples, blues, and Payne's gray. Always working light to dark. And that's everything I know in just under a minute. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing what you make with watercolors. I get asked all the time how I paint skin, so here's a little tutorial. With watercolors, you always want to work light to dark, so always begin with a little Winsor orange, then with rose madder, which is pink. Then I start to fill in the shadows with some deeper reds and some more pinks, building up with more pinks and then purple for the shadows. And then touching it off with some white to really make it pop. For men, I usually add a little bit more teal to the skin tones to give it a bit more of a 5 o'clock shadow look. And you can usually get a little darker in the shadows too. For someone who's really pale, I add a lot more water and I try to keep the pigment very, very soft. Cool colors will give the person a bit of a sickly look if that's what you're going for. And if your subject has darker skin, I do the same technique, but then I add a little bit more burnt umber to the mix. And you really want to layer in a lot of colors and get a lot of purples, get a lot of reds in there, and really just have fun with it. Now this is just my technique, this is how I taught myself, you can do it any way you want to. All of the colors and materials that I use are in my bio, if it helps, but nothing's going to teach you better than practice. No tutorials or art hacks can replace learning by trial and error. Make those mistakes, learn what works for you. That's half the fun of making art, discovering your own style. Did you know that the quality of the paper that you use can actually affect how your watercolor painting comes out? It's true! Seriously! The type of paper that you use affects the saturation of color, the texture, and the distribution of the pigment. Let's do a little test. I'll paint some swatches on different paper. The first one, just plain old sketchbook paper. It's only 60-pound paper, meaning it's not very thick. Next is my travel sketchbook. It has 90-pound paper, and it served me well for many years. It's cheap, but durable. The Strathmore watercolor paper is 140 pounds. It's the heaviest you can get, I think, and a bit more expensive, but I still prefer the cheaper Canson. And speaking of Canson, this is also 140 pounds, and it's the watercolor paper I use for my commissions and 90% of my work. It's a good all-around and cheap paper. And now we get to the good stuff. French-made Arches watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton and it's a lot more expensive. And finally, L'Aquarelle by Canson. I think L'Aquarelle just means watercolor in French. It's 100% cotton paper and also quite pricey. As you can see, the thinner paper has less pigment, the colors are less saturated. But while the cheaper Canson and Strathmore are both the same weight as the more expensive French paper, there's more saturation and texture in the latter due to them being made of 100% cotton. So same paint, different paper, different results. So I wanted to show you how and why you should tape your paintings down, but literally nothing went according to plan. First, let's talk about why you need to tape your paintings down. There's two reasons. One, you get a really nice clean edge. Look at that. And two, watercolor, mainly the water part, will make your paper buckle and bend. Yikes. Tape will keep your art nice and flat. So that's why we use it. But what kind of tape works best, you ask? Let's see what happens when we use just plain old Scotch tape. It's not made for something like this, so it should either rip the paper or the paint should bleed through that or, oh, that actually doesn't look so bad. Let's try the painter's tape that you would get from a hardware store. It's not made for the delicacy that's watercolor paper. In my experience is that watercolor will bleed through and nope, that actually came out okay too. Wow. I see lots of you using washi tape. I've never tried it before, but fortunately my wife loves it and gave me some to play with. Look at the little artist squirrel in his little artist easel. This actually did pretty good too. Now I use professional tape. It's amazing. I get it at my local art store. It's like $12 a roll. It's the best. It never rips my paper and it never oh crap. Really? Well, there goes 30 years of art down the toilet. Use whatever you want to. I don't know what I'm doing. My whole life is a lie. So you want to know more about watercolor pencils, and maybe also watercolor markers. Watercolor pencils feel very much like regular colored pencils. They're fun to draw with, and the colors are pretty bright. Watercolor markers feel pretty much like regular markers. They're super saturated, and they have a brush tip on one side and a felt tip on the other. Now the cool thing about both the watercolor pencil and markers is you can add water to them and poof, they turn into watercolor paint. It's literally magic. Like, no one's ever been able to explain this, so don't even try. The pencils are very transparent and closest to watercolor from a pan. The markers are very saturated and feel more like ink. The color is really powerful and there are remnants from where the marker tip touched the paper that just won't come up. With the watercolor pencils, I tried to use them like colored pencils, but just not pressing down as hard. I laid out the colors, then added water. It gave a really nice watercolory feel, and I really kind of liked it. The markers, on the other hand, just did not play nice. The colors didn't blend, they were super saturated, and you can even see the two marks in Spidey's eyes where I put the spot of blue. The marks just didn't come up. So I don't recommend the markers, but the pencils were kind of fun. This is my Winsor & Newton Field Box. It's my traveling watercolor kit I've had for years. I think I paid around $150 for it. It's amazing. But I just found out that there's a student version and it's like 25 bucks. So let's compare it to the pro version. Looks like the only difference is the paints. From what I was able to see on the Winsor & Newton website, apparently the Cotman has just got a little less pigment sometimes. Let's try them out. Let's compare them. I've got burnt sienna in both the Pro Series and the Cotman Series. We'll do a side-by-side comparison. This could be fun. Initially, the Pro one looks a little glossier. See that? I'll just do a little sketch so we have something to paint. And a little water to activate it, and let's give it a shot. It feels like regular paint, and it goes on really smooth. It's vibrant, and it feels like the Pro Series. Here, this is the more expensive Pro version, and you can see they look identical, and they even feel identical. I don't know, maybe there's some long-term benefits to the Pro version that you don't get with the Cotman version. Maybe they last longer. They even go really well over inks, which is something I use a lot. I don't know, if you're a student and you're on a budget, 25 bucks is a pretty good deal. Okay, so this is my best explanation for the difference between hot press watercolor paper and cold press watercolor paper. Cold press is a rough, textured kind of feel to it. And hot press is smooth, no texture to it. But of course you're going to want to see it in action, and I've got just the thing to draw. We'll start off with cold press, the textury one. I like watercolors for cold press because the texture gives the watercolors a lot of nooks and crannies to play around in. The watercolor needs to be spontaneous, unpredictable, and all that texture works perfectly for watercolors. Look at that. Art. Now hot press, the smooth one, I don't really like how watercolors go down on it. There's no spontaneity, no art. It just sits there lifeless. Ugh. I much prefer gouache paints on the hot press paper, because with gouache, the focus is on the brush strokes, not the paper. Now this is just my preference, and there's no right or wrong way to use either paper or paints. Just remember, hot press is smooth, cold press is textured, and anything after that is completely up to you and your imagination. Pick up both, play around, and have fun. Let's talk about paintbrushes. I don't know much about paintbrushes, but I do know what I like, and that is a good point. My very first brushes were the cheapest ones I could find. Brushes like the synthetic Sable Artist Loft brushes from Michaels. They're about $5 for a set of 5, and half that with a coupon. They're good beginner brushes, but they lose their point within a few weeks of painting. Last Christmas, my wife, bless her heart, bought me these Da Vinci Maestro brushes. They're $45 per brush. Per brush! They're made with real sable, so that should make them better, right? Nope. Within an hour of using them, they looked like this. Surprisingly, the paintbrushes that lasted the longest were these synthetic Sable travel brushes. After the Da Vinci fiasco, I pulled them out and used them every single day for 6 months, and they held their point the entire time. I got them on Amazon for $17 for a set of 3. Then about 3 months ago, Escher Lab sent me their synthetic Sable brush set of 10 brushes to try out. The set's $50, and after about 3 months of painting with them every day, they're still going strong. So what did I learn from all this? I think I like the synthetic over the real Sable. Choosing the right brush for you is a very personal thing. This one's too hard, this one's too soft. There's no right or wrong, just what feels right for you and your wallet. This is my traveling watercolor set. I take it with me everywhere I go. When I first got it, it came with a predetermined set of colors, picked out by the manufacturer, I guess. And you can get replacements for them, which is kind of neat. There's cheaper kits you can buy which have more color options, but want to hear something really cool? You don't have to replace them with the pre-made half pans. They make empty pans. They come in like a set of 72. I have no idea what you're supposed to do with 72 of these things. And you can put in your own watercolor paint straight from the tube. I like the tubes better than the half pans because it's a better deal. You get more paint for less money. I'm frugal like that. As artists, we tend to have colors we like better than others. We have favorites. Our palettes become unique to our personal taste, and that's what makes us, us. So don't be bound by a predetermined set of colors. Create your own palette to take with you on your adventures. Show the world how you see it through the colors that best represent you and your art. Because you and your art are unique. Shouldn't your colors be unique too? I've always wanted to try out Dr. Martin's concentrated watercolors, so I bought a set from my favorite online art store, Blick. I noticed the pigment settled in the bottle, so I gave it a good shake before opening. From what I read, a single drop goes a long way, so here goes. I'm applying pure color on the left and watering it down on the right. It's super saturated, and a single drop really does go a long way. There's 14 colors in the set, but for some reason 5 of them were very similar reds. Curious. With the colors being so powerful, I wondered how they'd lift up if you made a mistake. I compared them to my normal Winsor & Newton watercolors, and you can see that it really stains the paper a lot. And now for the real test. How does it handle painting people? A quick Google search introduced me to a British TV character named Doc Martin. How cool is that? The liquid watercolors went over my line art like a dream. I really liked that. But unfortunately, the colors were so saturated that in the end, poor Doc Martin wound up looking like Homer Simpson. Go! So apparently using Dr. Martin's concentrated watercolors, for me, is like turning up the saturation all the way. While I may not be using it for skin tones, I can use it for graphic designs, or a powerful pop of color in the hair, or a really bold background color. Dr. Martin's concentrated watercolors are powerful, maybe too powerful, so I'll be using them sparingly. The great thing about a watercolor block or pad is that all 4 sides are glued down so the paper doesn't warp when painting. But so many of you ask how you get the paper out of the watercolor pad if it's glued down on all 4 sides. It's here, in this corner. See that? No glue. Now before I show you how to get the paper out, I'm not going to waste the paper that the fine people of Etcher Labs sent me. So I'll just do a quick sketch of Kim Lexler from Better Call Saul. Look, the paper is soaked, but it's staying perfectly flat because glue. This is a really quick doodle, but it's got colored pencils, watercolors, and gouache, and I threw a lot of water on it, and the paper held up really well. Kudos to Etcher for the quality paper, even though it's clearly not hot press. Now that the sketch is done, let's go to our little unglued corner. Grab a palette knife, or if you don't have one, a butter knife or a letter opener will work just fine. And here's the fun part. I don't know why this is so satisfying, but it is, okay? Maybe it's a tactile thing or ASMR, or maybe it just subconsciously means that the painting is done. And look, the next page is ready to be painted. See? I hope that answers your questions on how to remove a paper from watercolor block. Next time you're having trouble with your art, need help fast, better call me, I guess. Saul's not gonna be much help. Neither will Kim. I always get asked if I make mistakes with watercolors, and the answer is of course yes, I make a lot of mistakes. And there is no undo button in traditional art, so it's good to know what to do when mistakes happen. If it's something simple like watercolor, you can just dab it out with a paper towel, then pull up the remaining pigment with water from your paintbrush, and then fill in the light area with the original colors. Now if it's a big mistake, like say a pen mark or ink that really won't come up with water, then it's time to bring out the big guns, like gouache, which is more opaque. Find a color or mix a color that's close to what you're looking for. In this case, this dried a little bit too dark, so I brought out the white. White gouache will knock out pretty much everything once it's dry. Then I can come back in with watercolors to try to match the original colors that were there. Gouache and watercolors are essentially the same thing, with gouache just having a little bit more pigment in it so you can blend the watercolors with the gouache. I hope this gives you the confidence to play around on your own. And remember, mistakes happen to all of us, so don't be afraid to make those mistakes and learn from them.